When tech executive Brandon Cole boarded first class with his secret mistress, he thought he'd gotten away with the perfect lie. But when the lead flight attendant's voice came over the intercom, warm, professional, unmistakable, his blood ran cold. It was Destiny, his fiancée, and she'd seen everything. Brandon Cole had always been good at compartmentalizing his life. At 33, he'd mastered the art of keeping different worlds separate, different versions of himself neatly tucked away in their designated spaces. The Brandon who sat in boardrooms commanding six-figure deals was different from the Brandon who whispered sweet promises to his fiancée over candlelit dinners. And today, settling into his first-class seat with Cassandra Wells draped across his arm like an expensive accessory, he was yet another version entirely, the reckless one, the one who believed he was untouchable. Cassandra giggled as the flight attendant took their coats, her blonde hair cascading over her shoulder as she leaned into Brandon's space. She was 29, an influencer with a carefully curated life that existed primarily on Instagram, and she had no idea that the man beside her was engaged. Brandon had told her he was divorced, that his marriage had ended badly, that he was finally ready to move on. It was a lie that came easily to him now, practiced and polished like a corporate pitch. Back in their shared apartment in San Francisco, Destiny Brooks was probably getting ready for her own shift, pulling her dark hair into the neat bun required by airline regulations, checking her uniform one last time in the mirror. She'd kissed Brandon goodbye 3 days ago, believing he was heading to Austin for a tech conference. She'd even packed his favorite snacks for the trip, reminding him to text her when he landed safely. The memory of her smile, trusting and warm, flickered through Brandon's mind before he pushed it away. He'd chosen this route specifically because Destiny's usual flights were domestic. She worked the San Francisco to Chicago route, the LA to Seattle corridor. She never flew international and certainly not to the Caribbean. The champagne arrived, golden and bubbling in crystal flutes. Cassandra raised hers in a toast, her lips glossed and perfect. To us, she purred, and to finally getting away from everything. Brandon clinked his glass against hers, the guilt that had been nagging at him dissolving in the effervescence of the moment. This was what he deserved, wasn't it? 3 years with Destiny had been good, but lately he'd felt restless. His colleagues made jokes about him dating a flight attendant, his mother made thinly veiled comments about Destiny's service position, and somewhere along the way, Brandon had started to wonder if they were right. Maybe he'd settled. Maybe he deserved someone more like Cassandra, someone who fit better into his world of tech parties and venture capital dinners. His phone buzzed against his thigh, a text from Destiny. "Good luck with your presentation today, baby. I know you're going to kill it. Love you to the moon and back." Brandon stared at the message, something heavy settling in his chest. Then Cassandra's hand was on his arm, her voice pulling him back, and he silenced the phone without responding. The pre-flight announcements began, the usual safety procedures and welcome messages. Brandon was barely listening, his attention focused on Cassandra's story about some influencer drama, when a voice cut through the cabin that made his blood turn to ice. "Good afternoon, passengers. This is your lead flight attendant, Destiny Brooks, and on behalf of the captain and the entire crew, I'd like to welcome you aboard Flight 447 with service to Providenciales, Turks and Caicos." Brandon's champagne flute nearly slipped from his hand. The color drained from his face so quickly that Cassandra noticed immediately, her perfectly shaped eyebrows drawing together in concern. "Baby, are you okay? You look like you've seen a ghost." He couldn't speak. His throat had closed up, his mind racing through impossible calculations. Destiny never flew Caribbean routes, never. She'd complained just last month about how her seniority wasn't high enough for the international assignments. What was she doing on this plane? He slouched down in his seat, pulling his baseball cap lower over his eyes, his heart hammering against his ribs. Maybe she wouldn't come to first class. Maybe there was another flight attendant handling their section. Maybe he could get through this flight without her seeing him, and somehow, some way, he could figure out what to do once they landed. But fate, it seemed, had other plans. Destiny Brooks had been a flight attendant for 8 years, and in that time, she'd learned to read people with the kind of precision that came from spending thousands of hours in the air with strangers. She could spot a nervous flyer from 3 rows away, could identify a difficult passenger before they opened their mouth, could sense tension in a cabin like a change in air pressure. But nothing in her training had prepared her for the moment she walked down the first-class aisle and locked eyes with her fiancé. Time seemed to stop. She saw him there in seat 2A, and for a split second, her professional mask nearly cracked. Then she saw the woman beside him, blonde, beautiful, draped across his arm with an intimacy that made Destiny's stomach turn. The woman was wearing the kind of casual wealth that Destiny recognized from Brandon's world: designer athleisure, a Cartier bracelet that caught the light, nails that had clearly been done that morning at some expensive salon. But Destiny had been raised by a mother who taught her that dignity was a choice you made every single day, regardless of circumstance. So she straightened her spine, fixed her professional smile firmly in place, and approached their seats. "Sir, ma'am, welcome aboard. Can I get you anything before takeoff?" Brandon couldn't meet her eyes. He'd gone pale, his jaw clenched so tight she could see the muscle jumping in his cheek. Cassandra, oblivious to the earthquake happening beside her, beamed up at Destiny with the kind of casual dismissiveness that wealthy people often showed service workers. "2 champagnes," Cassandra announced, as if Destiny was simply part of the airplane's equipment. "We're celebrating." Destiny's voice remained steady, though inside she was screaming. "Celebrating what, if I may ask?" "A romantic getaway," Cassandra giggled, leaning into Brandon possessively. This man finally swept me off my feet. Destiny let her gaze slide to Brandon, let him see everything she was feeling in that one look. "How special," she said, her voice ice-cold beneath its professional warmth. "I'll be right back with those drinks." She walked to the galley on legs that felt like they belonged to someone else. Her colleague Gabrielle, a veteran flight attendant who'd been flying for 20 years, took one look at Destiny's face and immediately pulled her aside. "Girl, what's wrong? You look like you're about to pass out." Destiny's hands were shaking as she gripped the counter. "My fiancé is in seat 2A, with another woman. They're going on vacation together." Gabrielle's eyes went wide. "Oh, hell no, I'll take first class. You don't need to deal with this." But Destiny shook her head, something hardening inside her. "No, I'm going to finish this flight, professionally." She wasn't going to give Brandon the satisfaction of seeing her break. She wasn't going to let him turn her into a woman who made scenes or lost her composure. She was going to show him exactly who Destiny Brooks was and what he was losing. For the next 2 hours, Destiny served Brandon and Cassandra with flawless courtesy. She brought them champagne and warm towels, offered them lunch options with a smile that never wavered. Brandon looked like he might be sick every time she approached, while Cassandra treated her with the kind of casual rudeness that spoke of a lifetime of having people wait on her. The Diet Coke was too warm. The pretzels were stale. Not once did Cassandra say please or thank you. Destiny took it all with grace because that's what she'd been trained to do, but more than that, it's who she was. She'd grown up watching her mother work 3 jobs to put her through college, had learned that respect wasn't something you demanded, but something you earned through your actions. Every time Cassandra snapped her fingers or made a demand, Destiny could see Brandon flinch, could see something shifting behind his eyes. Then the turbulence hit. It came suddenly, the plane dropping through an air pocket with enough force to send drinks flying, and overhead bins rattling. The cabin filled with screams and gasps. In economy, a child started crying, her wails piercing through the chaos. A businessman who'd been rude to Destiny earlier started shouting, demanding that someone do something, as if the flight attendants could control the weather itself. Destiny moved through the cabin with practiced efficiency, her training taking over. She checked seatbelts, secured loose items, her voice calm and reassuring even as the plane bucked beneath them. She found the crying child, a little girl no more than 5, and knelt beside her, her voice soft and steady. "Hey there, sweetheart." "It's okay. The plane is just dancing with the clouds." Have you ever been on a roller coaster? The child nodded, tears streaming down her face. Well, this is just like that. A little bumpy, but totally safe. How about we count together? Can you count to 10 with me? From his first-class seat, Brandon watched her. Really watched her, perhaps for the first time in months. He saw the way she comforted that child with genuine warmth, the way she helped an elderly woman through a panic attack with breathing exercises, the way she maintained perfect composure while Cassandra beside him was gripping his arm so hard her nails left marks, complaining loudly about wanting to get off this death trap. Then Mr. Henderson, an older gentleman in seat 12C, clutched his chest and slumped forward. Destiny was there in seconds. "Is there a doctor on board?" she called out, already reaching for the emergency medical kit. When no one responded, she didn't hesitate. She'd been trained for this, had taken every additional certification the airline offered. Her hands were steady as she administered oxygen, as she checked his pulse and monitored his vitals, as she coordinated with the captain about potentially diverting the flight. "Stay with me, sir," she said, holding Mr. Henderson's hand, her voice a lifeline in his moment of crisis. "You're going to be okay. Breathe with me. In through your nose, out through your mouth. That's it. You're doing great." Brandon watched from first class, and something inside him cracked open. This woman, his fiancée, the woman whose job his mother had mocked, whose career his colleagues had joked about, was saving someone's life with skill and courage and compassion that put his own accomplishments to shame. Every quarterly report he'd delivered, every deal he'd closed, suddenly seemed hollow compared to what he was witnessing. Cassandra's voice cut through his thoughts, petulant and sharp. Why is she making such a big deal about this? Can't they just land the plane already? This is ruining our vacation. In that moment, Brandon saw her clearly, saw the selfishness that he'd mistaken for confidence, the shallowness that he'd confused with sophistication, and he saw what he'd done, what he'd thrown away, and the weight of it nearly crushed him. The plane landed safely. Mr. Henderson was stable, rushed to the hospital by paramedics who praised Destiny's quick thinking and skill. The passengers applauded her as they deplaned, some stopping to thank her personally. Through it all, Destiny maintained her professional composure, her smile never quite reaching her eyes. Brandon lingered after everyone else had left, gathering courage that suddenly seemed in short supply. He found her in the galley, alone for the first time since the flight began. "Destiny," he started, his voice cracking on her name. "I can explain." She held up her hand, and the look she gave him was worse than anger. It was disappointment, sadness, finality. "Don't," she said quietly. "You know what hurt most? Not the cheating, not even the lying. It's that you thought so little of me, of what we had, that you didn't even check my schedule before flaunting her." She took a breath, and when she spoke again, her voice was steady and strong. "That woman you brought." She snapped her fingers at me, treated me like I was beneath her, like this job, something I love, something I'm good at, makes me less than human, and you let her. Brandon opened his mouth, scrambling for words that wouldn't come, excuses that sounded pathetic even in his own head. "You know what I realized today," Destiny continued, reaching for her engagement ring. The diamond caught the light, sparkling one last time before she slid it across the counter toward him. "Your mother was right. I'm too good for you, just not in the way she meant." She picked up her bag, squared her shoulders, and looked at him one final time. "Have a nice vacation, Brandon." She walked away with her head high, and Brandon stood frozen in the empty plane, the ring cold and heavy in his palm, understanding too late what he'd lost. At the gate, Cassandra was waiting, her arms crossed and her face twisted with anger. "What took so long?" "And who was that flight attendant? She kept staring at you." Brandon's voice was hollow. "That was my fiancée." The slap echoed through the terminal. "You're what? You said you were divorced. Oh my God, you're engaged." Cassandra's face flushed red with fury and humiliation. "Lose my number, you lying piece of—" She didn't finish, just turned on her designer heels and stormed away. Brandon stood alone in the middle of the busy terminal, travelers flowing around him like water around a stone, watching both women walk out of his life. The vacation he'd planned, the lies he'd told, the life he'd thought he wanted, all of it turned to ash in his hands. 3 months later, Destiny Brooks stood in the ballroom of the Henderson Grand Hotel, wearing a gown that made her feel like royalty. The room was full of airline executives, industry leaders, and journalists with cameras flashing. Mr. Henderson, the passenger she'd saved, stood beside her at the podium, smiling proudly. It turned out that Mr. Henderson wasn't just a grateful passenger. He was the CEO of Henderson Global Airlines, one of the largest airline conglomerates in the world. He'd been flying commercial incognito that day, auditing service quality firsthand, and what he'd witnessed had changed everything. "You didn't just save my life, Ms. Brooks," he said into the microphone, his voice carrying across the room. "You showed me what excellence looks like. Your skill, your compassion, your professionalism under pressure. That's exactly what I want every passenger to experience. That's exactly what I want to teach every member of our crew." The job offer had come a week after the flight. Director of Flight Services Training and Development, six-figure salary, full benefits, company car, and the opportunity to revolutionize how the entire industry thought about in-flight care and customer service. Destiny had cried when she got the call, not from sadness, but from the overwhelming realization that the worst day of her life had somehow become the catalyst for her greatest triumph. Her mother was in the audience, tears streaming down her face. Her colleagues from the airline, including Gabrielle, were there cheering. The local news had covered her story. Local flight attendant becomes airline executive after heroic act, and she'd been invited to speak at conferences across the country. Somewhere across the city, in an apartment much smaller than the one he used to afford, Brandon Cole scrolled through social media on his phone. He'd lost his VP position 2 months ago after an unrelated scandal involving workplace misconduct came to light. His life had unraveled quickly after that flight. Cassandra had exposed him on her social media, his reputation had taken a hit, and the stress had affected his work performance until the company had decided to restructure his position. Now he stared at photos of Destiny at the gala, glowing and confident in a way he'd never fully appreciated when she was his. He tried calling her number, but it went straight to a message saying the number was no longer in service. He sent an email that bounced back, undeliverable. She'd erased him completely from her life, and he couldn't even blame her. His apartment was a mess, dishes piled in the sink, laundry overflowing from the hamper. On his phone, Cassandra's posts popped up in his feed. She was dating a professional athlete now, someone who apparently treated her better than Brandon ever had. Everyone had moved on. Everyone except him, stuck in the rubble of a life he'd destroyed with his own hands. Meanwhile, in her new corner office overlooking the San Francisco skyline, Destiny sat at her desk reviewing training protocols. Gabrielle stopped by with coffee, grinning at the sight of her friend in this new role. "So, how's the big executive doing?" Destiny smiled, and it was genuine, reaching all the way to her eyes. "You know what's funny? I thought that day was the worst of my life. Turned out to be the best thing that ever happened to me." "Girl, karma doesn't play." Gabrielle laughed. "Did you see he lost his job?" "I did," Destiny said softly. "And honestly, I don't feel happy about it. I don't feel anything about it. He's just someone I used to know." She looked at the photo on her desk. Her mother, her friends, herself in uniform receiving her first commendation. There was no room for Brandon in that frame. No room for him in her heart anymore either. Her phone buzzed with a new message. "Ms. Brooks, the board meeting is ready for you." She stood, smoothing down her blazer, and caught her reflection in the office window. The woman looking back at her was strong, successful, and free. She'd learned that sometimes the universe doesn't punish you by giving you what you want. It protects you by taking away what you thought you needed. Brandon had taken her ring, her trust, her vision of the future. But what he couldn't take was who she was at her core, her character, her strength, her ability to rise above pain and betrayal. And that, she realized, Walking down the hallway toward her meeting was all she'd ever needed. Sometimes the person you think will break you becomes the catalyst for your transformation. Sometimes losing what you thought was everything makes space for what you actually deserve. And sometimes the woman who gets treated like she's not enough becomes the woman who proves she was always more than enough. Brandon thought he could have it all: the career, the devoted fiancée, the exciting affair. But in trying to have everything, he lost what mattered most. Destiny lost a cheating fiancé but gained something far more valuable: proof that her worth was never tied to who loved her, but to who she'd always been. The woman he underestimated, whose job he'd allowed others to disrespect, whose love he'd taken for granted, she didn't just survive his betrayal. She soared above it, higher than he could ever reach. Because respect isn't given, it's earned. And karma? Karma never misses its mark.